The fan who couldn't stop shaking. It was a quiet afternoon in Los Angeles when the story began, one of those warm days when the city feels calm, but life still has its surprises. Outside a small movie studio, fans gathered behind the barricades, holding posters and phones, waiting for a glimpse of Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock. They were there for a reunion interview. The first time the two stars had appeared together in years. Among the crowd stood a young woman named Emily. She wasn't just a fan. She was someone who had grown up watching their movies during her hardest years. Speed had helped her survive the loss of her father. The lake house had made her believe that distance couldn't kill love. And Keanu's quiet kindness in interviews had taught her that fame didn't mean forgetting how to be human. She clutched a letter in her hand, a simple, folded page she'd written weeks before, never imagining she'd actually get the chance to give it to him. Her hands shook as security tightened the line. When the door opened and Keanu stepped out, the crowd screamed. He waved, smiling softly, looking calm as always, humble, gentle, almost shy. Sandra followed, radiant and full of life, greeting fans warmly. Emily's heart pounded. She called his name, but her voice got lost in the noise. She stepped forward slightly, holding up the letter. "Keanu, please," she whispered, her voice breaking. He noticed. Even among hundreds of faces, he noticed her trembling hands. He walked toward her slowly, ignoring the flashes of cameras and the guards who tried to stop him. "Hi," he said softly, smiling the way only he could. Kind, sincere, unhurried. The world around Emily blurred. Tears welled up before she could speak. You helped me through so much," she stammered. Keanu didn't rush her. He simply nodded and said, "Thank you for telling me that." "What's your name?" "Emily," she said through tears. "My dad loved your movies. He used to say you remind him of kindness. He passed away last year, and I just wanted to thank you for making us smile." Everyone around them went silent. Even Sandra, standing a few feet away, stopped signing autographs to watch. Keanu took the letter gently from Emily's hand. "Thank you for this, Emily," he said. "Your dad sounds like a wonderful man." She nodded, crying harder now. "He was," Keanu smiled softly. "Then I'll read this in his honor." And then something unexpected happened. He reached out and hugged her. Not a short, polite hug, but one full of warmth and presence. The kind of hug that says, "I see you. You matter." The crowd cheered, but Keanu didn't notice the noise. He just whispered, "You're not alone, okay?" Emily nodded against his shoulder, whispering back, "Thank you," when he stepped back. Sandra came over, touched Emily's arm and said gently, "He does that, makes people remember hope." And as Keanu and Sandra walked into the studio, Emily stood frozen, her tears turning into the kind that feel like healing. But what no one knew was that the letter she gave him would lead to something much bigger. A story of kindness that would soon change more lives than she could imagine. The letter that made him stop. The interview that day went perfectly. Cameras flashed, the hosts laughed, and everyone was talking about how beautiful it was to see Keanu and Sandra together again. But behind the smiles, Keanu's thoughts kept drifting back to the trembling girl outside, the one named Emily, who had handed him the folded letter with shaking hands and tearful eyes. Hours later, when the lights were off and the studio was quiet, Keanu sat alone in his dressing room. He opened his bag and saw the letter. It was slightly crumpled, the ink smudged by what looked like tears. He hesitated for a moment, then unfolded it carefully. It began simply, "Dear Keanu, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I wanted to thank you for being the person my dad admired most. When he was sick, we watched your movies together. He said you reminded him that kindness isn't weakness, it's strength. After he died, I lost hope for a while. But one day I saw an interview where you said, 'Be kind for no reason.' It brought me back. It reminded me that even small acts can save people." Keanu stopped reading for a second, his eyes heavy. The quiet words on the page carried more weight than any script he'd ever read. He continued, "I'm studying filmmaking now because of people like you and Sandra. I want to tell stories that make people feel what your movies made me feel, less alone. By the end, the letter wasn't just about admiration. It was about how kindness travels, from one person to another, across time, even after loss. Keanu folded the paper again, his hands still. He whispered, "Thank you, Emily," like a small prayer. The next morning, Sandra knocked on his door. "You okay?" she asked, holding 2 cups of coffee. He smiled faintly. "I read something last night, from a fan. It reminded me why we do all this." "Was it the girl from yesterday?" Sandra asked softly. He nodded. "Yeah, she wrote about her dad. I think it's the most honest letter I've ever received." Sandra smiled, her eyes soft. "You should write her back." Keanu looked down at the folded letter again. "No, I think I'll do something better." Later that week, while his team was planning his next charity event, Keanu made a quiet call to the film school Emily had mentioned in her letter. He didn't give his name. He just said he wanted to sponsor a scholarship for one student who had lost a parent, but still dreamed of creating stories that made people feel less alone. A few days later, the school called Emily. She sat frozen as the voice on the phone said, "You've been chosen for a special scholarship, fully funded by an anonymous donor." She burst into tears. Who did this?" The caller just said, "Someone who believes in your story." And across the city, Keanu Reeves folded the letter one last time and placed it in his desk drawer. He didn't need thanks. The smile on that girl's face in his memory was enough. But he didn't know. The world would soon find out what he'd done. And when it did, it would reveal something even more powerful than fame. The story the world discovered a week later. Emily walked through the gates of her film school with tears in her eyes and a heart full of disbelief. She still didn't know who had given her the scholarship. All she was told was that the donor wanted her to keep telling stories that make people believe again. It felt like something her father would have said. She spent her days studying hard, throwing herself into her projects, filming small stories about people who find hope in simple kindness. Her classmates noticed how every film she made carried warmth, sadness, and love all in one breath. But one afternoon, while editing a short film in the school's quiet computer lab, her phone began to buzz with messages. "Emily, check Twitter now," one friend texted. "You're trending." Another said, confused. She opened her phone and froze. There it was, all over social media. Keanu Reeves secretly funds scholarships for film students. One girl's letter started it all. Someone from the film school had leaked the story to the press, connecting the details. The article described how an anonymous donation had been made in honor of a student who lost her father, and how it all traced back to a letter given to Keanu Reeves at a studio event. Within hours, it spread everywhere. News channels called it the act of silent kindness. Fans shared it saying, "This is why the world loves Keanu." Emily sat frozen in her chair. She covered her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. "He really did this," she whispered. "He actually read my letter." The next day her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Interviews, offers, questions. Everyone wanted her to talk about what had happened. But she refused. "It wasn't about me," she said. "It was about a man who believed a simple thank you could still mean something." Meanwhile, Keanu was on set in a quiet location outside the city when his team showed him the article. He sighed, smiling softly. "It wasn't supposed to be public," he said. His assistant laughed gently. "You can't hide kindness forever." When Sandra called him later that night, her voice was full of warmth. "You did it again, Keanu. Made the world cry for the right reasons." He chuckled softly. "I didn't do anything special. I just answered a letter." "No," she said. "You answered life." Keanu didn't reply. He just looked out the window of his trailer, the sun dipping low behind the trees, and thought of Emily's father, a man he never met but somehow understood. A few days later, Keanu received a small package in the mail. Inside was a photo, Emily standing in front of her classroom with her first short film crew. On the back, she had written, "Thank you for believing in stories and in me." He smiled. placed the photo next to the letter in his desk drawer, and whispered, "Your dad would be proud." But something else was about to happen, something that would bring them face to face again, in a moment that neither could have predicted. The reunion that wasn't planned. Months passed after the story went viral. Emily's short film, the one inspired by her father and Keanu's kindness, was selected for a student showcase in Los Angeles. It was a small event, nothing grand, but for her it meant everything. Her professors told her, "You have a gift for emotion, for truth," but all she could think about was how that gift was born from loss, from a letter, and from a man who reminded her that kindness still existed. The night of the screening, Emily stood backstage, her heart pounding. She wasn't used to crowds or cameras. The theater was full of people, students, teachers, local filmmakers, and a few guests whose names were not announced. She looked at the old pendant her father had given her and whispered, "This is for you." Her film began to play. It was a simple story. A young girl who loses her father but finds comfort in a stranger's compassion. It ended with a note on the screen, "Be kind, for no reason." The same words Keanu once said in an interview years ago. When the lights came back on, the room was silent. Then came applause, soft at first, then louder, until the whole hall was standing. Emily blinked back, tears overwhelmed. But then something happened that made her freeze. As she looked toward the audience, she saw someone standing in the back of the room. Tall, calm, familiar. Keanu Reeves. She thought her eyes were playing tricks. But then he smiled. The same gentle, quiet smile she had seen that day outside the studio. After the show ended, people rushed to meet the guests. Emily stood still, her heart racing, unsure whether to move or hide. Keanu approached slowly, hands in his pockets, humble as always. "You made me cry," he said softly, smiling. "You came," she whispered, unable to believe it. "I promised myself I would," he said. "I wanted to see what your letter started." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Everything I made." "It's because of you." Keanu shook his head gently. "No, Emily. It's because of you. I just reminded you that your heart still works." She laughed softly through her tears. "You make it sound easy." "It's not easy," he said. "But it's worth it." At that moment, the host called her name to come on stage for a surprise announcement. "Emily Thomas has been chosen to receive the Rising Storyteller Award, presented by someone very special." Keanu turned to her with a smile. "Guess that's my cue." As he walked on stage beside her, the audience cheered. Emily could barely hold the trophy with her shaking hands. Keanu leaned closer and whispered, "Your dad would be proud." "And so am I." She looked up at him, her voice breaking. "Thank you, Keanu, for seeing me that day." He nodded. "You saw me too." The cameras flashed. The applause grew louder, but to both of them, it felt quiet, just two people sharing a promise that had come full circle. But what happened after that night would prove that kindness doesn't just inspire. Sometimes it saves a life. The moment that almost ended everything, after that unforgettable night, Emily's life began to change. Her film spread online, reaching millions of people who found comfort in her message. She received messages from strangers all over the world, people saying her story helped them forgive, helped them grieve, helped them believe again. It was more than she ever dreamed of. Keanu kept in touch quietly, sending small notes every few weeks, a few kind words, sometimes a quote, sometimes just a reminder to keep making the world softer. They never called it friendship. It was something quieter, something built on mutual respect and shared pain. But fame is a strange thing. When the story about Keanu's kindness grew, so did the attention. Reporters started following Emily everywhere, twisting headlines, asking for drama that didn't exist. "Keanu's secret bond with a fan," they wrote. "Is there more than inspiration?" It became noise, cruel, endless noise. Emily tried to ignore it, but the pressure grew. One afternoon, she received a hateful message online, words so sharp they cut through her like glass. It said, "You're just using him for fame." That night she turned off her phone and sat alone in her apartment, tears streaming down her face. she whispered. "I never wanted this." She missed her dad, missed the simple peace she had before the world noticed her. A few hours later, Keanu called. She didn't answer. He called again. Finally, she picked up. His voice was calm, gentle, and full of concern. "Emily, talk to me. Are you okay?" She couldn't speak at first. Then she said softly, "I didn't ask for any of this, Keanu. I just wanted to say thank you." "No, they're making it ugly." He paused. "They did that to me too, for years. But listen to me. Don't let their noise drown your purpose. What you did came from truth. Hold on to that," she sniffled. "I don't think I'm strong like you. You're stronger," he said, "because you're still here, still feeling. And that's brave," she cried quietly. "Sometimes I just want to disappear." Keanu's tone softened even more. "If you ever feel that way again, promise me you'll call before you go anywhere dark." "Promise me." "I promise," she whispered. The next day, he visited her. No cameras, no assistants, just him. He showed up with coffee and said, "Let's take a walk." They went to a nearby park, where kids were laughing, dogs were running, and the world felt ordinary again. "When my life gets too loud," he said as they sat on a bench, "I come somewhere quiet like this. Because peace isn't found in silence. It's found in small, real moments." She looked at him, eyes red but calm. "You saved me again, you know that?" He smiled softly. "No, Emily. You saved yourself. I just reminded you where the light was." For the first time in weeks, she laughed. It was soft and shaky but real. And in that moment, under the golden light of the afternoon, Keanu realized something. That the letter he received months ago hadn't just changed Emily's life. It had changed his, too. But the story wasn't done yet. One final act of kindness was still waiting, one that would bring them both full circle, to the place where it all began. The circle of kindness. A year later, everything had changed again, but this time in the most beautiful way. Emily had finished her first feature film, a story about loss, kindness, and hope. The same themes that had once healed her now flowed through her work like sunlight through broken glass. It wasn't a big-budget movie, but it touched hearts wherever it was shown. Critics called it a film that feels like a hug. Keanu had been quietly supporting her behind the scenes, never seeking credit. He attended her small premiere, sitting in the back row, wearing the same quiet smile that had changed her life the first day they met. After the screening, people stood and clapped, some crying. Emily turned around to see him clapping too. Slow, proud, and genuine. After the applause faded, she walked up to him. "You came," she said softly. He nodded. "Of course. I wouldn't miss the story that started with a letter," she smiled, her eyes full of emotion. "You know, I still have the photo of that day. Me crying like a child," he chuckled quietly. "That's my favorite kind of photo, real." They stepped outside into the night air, the city lights glowing softly. Emily looked at him and said, "I never got to do for someone what you did for me. I've been waiting for that chance." Keanu smiled faintly. "You don't have to plan kindness, Emily. It always finds the right moment." And just then, that moment arrived. A young fan approached nervously, holding a notepad. She looked about 15, her hands shaking. "Miss Emily," she whispered shyly, "your movie helped me after my mom died. I wanted to say thank you." Emily's breath caught. She looked at the girl, then at Keanu, and she understood. This was her full circle. She knelt down, smiled, and said softly, "Thank you for telling me that. Your mom must have been amazing." The girl nodded through tears. "She was." Emily hugged her gently, whispering, "Keep believing in stories, okay?" When she stood back up, Keanu's eyes were glistening. "Now you know how it feels," he said quietly. She nodded, smiling through her tears. "Yeah, it feels like healing." They walked together down the quiet street after that. No cameras, no reporters. Just two people who understood what it meant to live with kindness, to pass it on instead of holding it. "You know," Emily said softly, "I used to think my dad sent you to save me. But maybe he sent you so I could learn how to save others." Keanu smiled, his voice low and thoughtful. "Or maybe he sent us both to remind the world that kindness still matters." They stopped at the corner where their paths would part again. He looked at her, proud and peaceful. "You've done well, Emily. Keep doing what you do, quietly, honestly, and with heart." She nodded. "And you?" He smiled faintly. "I'll keep walking my path, just a man trying to leave a little light wherever he goes." She hugged him one last time, whispering, "Thank you for everything." "No," he said softly. "Thank you. You reminded me why I started being kind in the first place." As he walked away, the streetlights glowed warmer, and Emily watched until he disappeared into the soft night. She realized then that real kindness never fades. It just changes hands. And somewhere in the world another story was already beginning, because one man stopped, smiled, and cared.